The following is an HDNet original presentation.
Tonight, inside the new internet revolution, billions at stake, but how to make money? There's no app for that.
Well, give me a couple of specific examples of how you generated revenue.
We don't do it yet, but we have a desire to do it.
You do not have a warrant. You have no right to be in here to do this.
Also, a special investigation. A powerful government bureaucracy takes on commercial fishermen, hook, line, and sinker.
They came in here with 20 agents, bulletproof vests on, guns, step away from the computers, step away from the desks. They took our dignity away. It was surreal.
We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Reports. Good evening. We begin tonight with a high-tech milestone. For the first time ever, there were more smartphones shipped from manufacturers in the fourth quarter of last year than personal computers. Now, just think about that. The gadget that began as a high-priced novelty is quickly replacing the desktop as our most needed and beloved piece of technology. Smartphones have created a new and growing class of constantly connected consumers. And in just a few years, it's projected that there will be more than 1 billion of them. People are calling this mobile revolution the next wave of the internet. And getting the attention of all those eyeballs has become big business. The way companies reach these mobile users is through apps, software applications that turn your phone into anything from an arcade game to a map of nearby banks. Some cost money, but many companies give them away for free, just for the chance to tap into this huge new audience. There are more than 350,000 apps available just for the iPhone. With so many programs, it's tough to get noticed. If you do, there's money to be had from big spending venture capitalists. Take a new free app called Color, a social networking program for sharing photographs. Investors say it's a winner, and they pumped $41 million into the startup. It's big money. Some say too much. The stakes are high. Investors and entrepreneurs are rushing in, afraid of being left behind. But some skeptics say it's a bubble waiting to burst. Trying to navigate these choppy waters is a harrowing ride. And tonight we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how one company is hoping to make it big in this new tech landscape. Our story begins on the 16th floor of an old brick building in Midtown Manhattan. Welcome to the home of Hashable, an internet startup with just 17 employees. If you haven't heard of it, you're not alone. And that's what 41-year-old founder and CEO Mike Yavenditti, along with his team, are working so hard to change.
When I hire someone, I tell them to be prepared for a 5-year slog.
Yavenditti knows what he's talking about because he's done this before. He was an executive at several early dot-coms, and he helped build an online ad business that sold to AOL for $340 million.
Well, question, you've already made it. Why not just sail off the coast of the Riviera, drink champagne, and savor what you've done?
Yeah, I did better than I ever expected to, that's for sure. But, you know, I love doing it. Things are too exciting right now to go sit. I'm not the type to sit on the beach anyway, so.
And Yavenditti thinks that Hashable could be his biggest success. One of the things he's trying to do is replace the business card.
So you don't give me a business card?
No, I don't hand it to you. That's old-fashioned. I want to do it the new way. So I type in your Twitter handle, which is Dan Rather Report, right? Right. It's adding you to my address book and denoting the fact that we are in the Hashable office. So it date stamps, time stamps, and geography stamps our virtual handshake. So I've just done it. Mm-hmm. I've sent you my business card. I even created this nice map that shows us geographically where we are. And I've told my friends that are on the system that I've friended that Dan Rather and I just met. And maybe someone will find that interesting.
And that leads to the other big feature of Hashable's app. You can record all your business and social interactions, and if you wish, broadcast them to the world. With people increasingly sharing their lives online, Yavendetti thinks it's a service with a lot of appeal. But Hashable isn't selling this service, it's giving it away for free, which raises the question, how do they make money?
Well, give me a couple of specific examples of how you generated revenue.
We don't do it yet. So the honest answer is we don't do it yet, but we have a desire to do it at some probably next year.
You heard that right. For now, the company is not making any money. But that's not unusual in the startup world. Someday, Hashable might sell ads or demographic information to marketers. That's the model for a lot of social media companies. But to make advertising worthwhile, you need users, lots and lots of users. Yavendetti knows the odds of making it are long.
Very few ever really get to profitability or sustain profitability in this industry. The more likely outcome is we generate revenue, we prove to the marketplace that we have a real business model, and then either we go public someday or someone buys the company.
For now, Hashable is operating on $15 million in funding from tech investors, including some of Yavendetti's own money.
Is there the potential of just flipping it for the money? That is, you get an idea, you get the financing, but you never intend, or you decide, I'm not going to bring this to fruition, I'm going to sell it to somebody else.
I think so. I don't think a lot of people would admit to that. I think it occurs, but most serious entrepreneurs and tech founders, they understand that it's a little bit harder than that, and actually you have to try to build something substantial and real if someone's going to give you a bunch of money for it.
What's the potential of the business? You've said to me you think it's unlimited.
It's enormous. If we do things right, it should be huge. There are billions of people using smartphones. People are using their phones hundreds of times a day now. And so there's an addiction factor there. I even sit at my desk and use my phone oftentimes instead of the computer, which is a really strange concept if you think about it, but it's okay for me. If it's okay for me, it's probably okay for hundreds of millions of other people. There's this mobile revolution, I call it a mobile tsunami. At the same time, there is a social tsunami going on the internet. Facebook is going to have 1 billion users probably in the next year or two. That's pretty extraordinary. I mean, can you imagine a TV station having 1 billion viewers? That's almost incomprehensible.
But how do you go about trying to be the next Facebook or Twitter? We started following Hashable in January as the company prepared to release its app to the masses. That's when we met Emily Hickey, Hashable's chief marketing officer and the woman spearheading the company's efforts to get noticed. Like Yavendetti, Hickey already has one successful startup under her belt. Way back in 1997, eons ago in internet time, she worked for an online job site called hotjobs.com.
I was the 14th employee. I was one of the core people that built the company. I'm very proud of it. It was, we IPO'd on the NASDAQ. We sold to Yahoo for $430 million. It was a huge home run.
But now, more than a decade later, it's a whole new ball game.
Hot Jobs was driven by traditional advertising. We did a Super Bowl ad. We were one of the first web companies to do a Super Bowl ad, and that's what really got us over the chasm.
Where can you find your dream job? Hotjobs.com. Thousands of hot jobs at top companies. Bingo.
That is not the current reality. The companies that are getting out of the gate now, like Facebook, Twitter, all the social platforms were built by word of mouth.
In other words, big brand marketing isn't in the game plan. Instead, startups like Hashable bank on going viral, spreading from user to user until they circle the globe. Of course, Hickey and her team weren't waiting around for word about Hashable to spread on its own. The goal was to hit it big at the country's most important tech conference, South by Southwest, held every March in Austin, Texas. Twitter exploded onto the scene at South by a few years ago. Hashable wants to be next. But when we started following Hashable at the end of January, the conference was just 6 weeks away, and there was still a lot of work to do.
I just bought milk today, and the due date on the milk is like kind of past when this stuff's all supposed to be built. So it's gonna be tight.
Teddy Jaughty is overseeing development of Hashable software. The company's been testing its service with a small group of users for months. But at South by Southwest, they're hoping it will catch on with a much wider audience. And that means making it fun and easy to use.
People just expect to look at something and quickly determine if it's going to be useful or not. And if we don't do that, then that's going to be worst case scenario. Because people are just going to be like, okay, whatever, this is not for me. It's a lame product. And it's tough to recover from that stuff.
That could be work for a week easily.
But having a great product is only part of the equation. In the next room, Hickey and media guru Rachel Sklar are brainstorming about everything from press strategy and party ideas
We have this idea of a contest while they're
to slogans and T-shirts.
We're open to V-neck or not. Like, that's awesome.
No detail is too small.
That's going to take at least 3 hours to figure out, V-neck or not.
To sell their networking app, the Hashable team is doing some networking of their own, reaching out to some of the most influential names in the startup world.
Robert Scoble has X thousands of users. Gary Vaynerchuk has X thousands of users, right? The big bloggers, people who have thousands of Twitter followers, you know, who people really follow and revere.
In marketing speak, they're called key influencers. The tech pundits, superstar investors, and successful entrepreneurs who can put your company on the map just by mentioning it. A favorable tweet or blog post from one of them is solid gold for startups like Hashable. But an app can't go viral unless ordinary people get excited about it and tell their friends. So, like an undiscovered rock band, Hashable is searching for some die-hard fans.
You have to find people who are passionate about technology, love being the first to use things. They know what number, sign up they were. If they were the 300th user on Twitter or whatever it might be. These are the people who you cannot launch a product without.
To drum up enthusiasm among users and to rub elbows with some of the big-name influencers, the Hashable team is embarking on a 6-week cross-country tour.
San Fran, LA, Austin, Boulder. We're trying to get people psyched about it and get them to download the app.
But one important event has fallen through the cracks. A meet and greet for Coloradans planning to attend South by Southwest.
Sorry, they just announced it. Boulder's actually tonight. Omaha,
Good to know.
Chicago.
It's tonight.
Indianapolis.
Oh,
Miami.
God. Will you have Danny look into tickets? Seriously? Like, we should try to go to that.
What's the weather like in Boulder?
I heard 6 degrees. Yeah.
Soon word comes they can just make it to the event in Boulder.
1 p.m.
If they leave right away.
I gotta cancel something. I'm sorry.
Give me like just, I just want to make sure. Are you guys gonna hop on that flight?
I think we should hop on that flight. What airport?
The Hashable team has gotten used to this frantic pace. In just a few months, they've chalked up 80,000 miles crisscrossing the country to lay the groundwork for Austin's South by Southwest. One stop was Hollywood's Sunset Boulevard, next to a swank steakhouse, B-list music venues, and the Hustler Cafe. You'll find the Truesdale Lounge, which trumpets itself as the hottest celebrity hideaway in town. That's where Hashable decided to throw a party to generate some buzz on the West Coast.
We're at the Hashable LA party with the founder of Hashable,
Mike Epiniti.
Yeah, so Mike, tell us a little bit about how you started Hashable and why it's growing so fast.
Oh boy, why did we start it?
These days, it's not hard to fill a room with people who make their living on the internet. Launching a .com has become almost as routine as opening a restaurant.
I started a company called Efficiency. I am launching my business at South by Southwest.
Yavandetti sees these up-and-coming web entrepreneurs as natural Hashable users. They're tech-savvy and eager to network.
Now we're real-life friends, not just Twitter friends.
To lure them to tonight's party, he arranged for several internet bigwigs to be here, like investor Jason Calacanis.
I do angel investing in about 10 companies a year, so that means I run a $25,000 check or a $50,000 check. Not a lot of money.
Okay, here we go.
And Yavandetti is also part of the attraction. Hashable's multimillionaire CEO is an investor himself, and in this crowd, there are plenty of people who want to meet him. Yavenditti is happy to oblige. After all, it's the perfect opportunity to show off the app.
I'm adding her to my address book, and I'm emailing her my business card. All in one fell swoop. That's Hashable. Boom. Done.
At South by Southwest, Hashable is planning an even ritzier and more exclusive version of tonight's event, with an entire room full of internet VIPs. Yavenditti is already talking it up.
I'll have Scoble, Gary Vaynerchuk, Jason Calacanis.
Some of the partiers have South by very much on their mind tonight as they hobnob. That's because Hashable will be paying for 15 of its top users to go. People are competing to send the most virtual business cards and log the most meetings, so they can head to Austin on Hashable's dime.
I'm pretty upset because I'm not in the top 10 anymore, so I got to meet a lot of people.
It's yet another enticement to use and spread Hashable.
Put your email address.
In addition to Los Angeles and Boulder, there were also stops in Miami, Toronto, Atlanta, and Milwaukee. But no Internet Roadshow would be complete without a visit to Silicon Valley, where more than 1/3 of all U.S. venture capital flows. At the top of Yavenditti's to-do list is a meeting with Robert Scoble, the man behind a popular blog called Scobleizer. An endorsement from him can give an early boost to a new startup.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
They met to do an interview for Scoble's video blog.
Right now we're having a business interaction, but if we go to Ritz and start drinking beer, do you have
Then
a
it's
different...
pound beers.
Pound beers.
Scoble agreed to be one of the VIPs at Hashable's South by Southwest party. And then Yavenditti rushed off to meet with another internet luminary, Naval Ravikant.
We hope to be the next breakout service.
Fantastic.
Ravikant was an early funder of Twitter and Foursquare, two darlings of South by Southwest in years past. He also founded the consumer review site Opinions. But his latest venture may be the most important. It's called AngelList, and it's like a dating site for .coms, connecting lonely entrepreneurs with the investors who might love them. Millions of dollars are changing hands on AngelList, and some people think it's fueling a startup frenzy. But Yavenditti isn't here to ask Ravikant for money. He just wants his presence at Hashable's South by party.
Scoble's going to be there, Gary Vaynerchuk, Calacanis. I'd love for you to be one of them.
Absolutely. I'd love to do it.
With 2 successful meetings down, the next stop is San Francisco's Palace of Fine Arts, where the Oscars of the Internet are underway.
And the Crunchy for Best Internet Application goes to Pandora.
Like that other award show, there are plenty of millionaires in attendance, but not surprisingly, the vibe here is more t-shirt and jeans than black tie.
What's up, founders?
Hashable is nominated in the Best Mobile App category. They weren't expecting to win, and they don't. But spending some time in this room gives you a good sense of the field they're playing in. A running joke is how few of these companies are actually making any money.
So far, Twitter has been too cool for revenue, and I'm just wondering if, is this?
And the web's ethos of out with the old is on prominent display. Many of the winners didn't exist 2 years ago. Toward the end of the evening, the 26-year-old CEO of Facebook, who's won 5 crunchies in the event's 4-year history, finishes in second place to the young founder of an even newer billion-dollar company.
This year's CEO of the Year is Andrew Mason of Groupon.
Groupon is a daily discount coupon site. Its founder fits the .com stereotype of irreverence to a T.
This just seems stupid. We're 2 years old. We have so many opportunities to still fuck this up.
When we return, the Hashable team goes to South by Southwest to see if they will make it big. That part of the story next.
Today is March 8th. I've been traveling basically nonstop for the past, 6 to 8 weeks.
The Hashable Roadshow has finally come to an end, and South by Southwest is right around the corner. Teddy Jaughty and his team are putting the finishing touches on Hashable's software.
For some reason, it just appears to be slow when you check into. We've got 2 more days before South by, and we've got like 2 more days of work. We've released an Android product, 2 versions of the iPhone, and almost 2 versions of the site. It's starting to feel good. It feels like it's spring outside. It feels like we're almost down at South by. And we've done a lot of work. We're all ready for a party.
And at South by Southwest, parties are business. Sure, there are also hundreds of panels covering everything from software development to winning over key influencers. And there's an exhibit hall where tech companies can show off their latest wares. But Hashable doesn't even bother having a booth on the trade show floor. No, the real action happens outside the convention center at the nightly bashes that officially aren't even part of the conference. And there are a lot of them. Jane Kim is Hashable's Vice President for Business Development.
It's not like there's one big party going on. There might be like 5 hot parties from like 6 to 8, 5 hot parties from 8 to 10, and then 5 hot parties from 10 to midnight, and then midnight to 2. There's no way you can keep up.
It seems like all the legwork leading up to the conference has paid off. People have heard of Hashable, and they're eager to find out what all the hype is about.
You guys are all the buzz leading up to this, and so I'm like, all right, let's see how this thing works.
Where are you from? I came in kind of asking people, like, have you heard of Hashable? Like, expecting them to say no most of the time, but they're like, oh yeah, totally.
Lots of people are talking about it. Lots of people are coming up to me and asking questions. Lots of people are downloading the app. We have, obviously data that shows that.
Hashable's party is at the upscale Driscoll Hotel. You need an invitation to get through the door and an even higher clearance to get behind the velvet rope and into the VIP room where Robert Scoble and the other internet celebs will be hanging out.
The VIP has to invite you in, right? Okay, so they literally have to come out and mingle and say, hey, come and join me.
You know your party is a success if the biggest problem is the long line of uninvited guests trying to talk their way through the door. Hashable wants to create an aura of exclusivity, but they also don't want to seem like snobs.
I got a link from somebody that signed up.
Yeah, so unfortunately they should have signed you up instead of, yeah, it was a direct invite to me, I'm sorry.
Can they do it now?
No, they cannot RSVP now.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people say they RSVP, we didn't invite them. It's hard because we don't want to say no, but we want people to come in and have a good time. So, minorly stressful. I'm sorry. Hi, last name?
Gianni.
For you. Good to see you. Hi. My wife Susan. Everybody that we wanted to come is here.
All of our table hosts are like some of the top influencers and top names in tech. People like Naval and Andy Weissman and Mark Sester. All the people who you'd want to get to who can help your company explode.
Toward the end of the night, there's still one place card left standing in the VIP room. But half an hour before the end of the party, it spreads to the room that Robert Scoble has arrived. A woman from the venue asked our producer not to film Scoble until we'd asked his producer for permission. But eventually we just went up and asked.
I'm Robert Scoble and I watch Dan Rather.
He ended up being the most accessible person we spoke to at the conference. A self-proclaimed geek and lifelong tech enthusiast, Scoble is a veteran of 8 South by conferences. He marveled at how much it's all changed.
3 years ago, there was one party with long lines. Now there's 5 parties with long lines. It's just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This is really important for these companies because it helps accelerate their company through that, we've never heard of them stage to, we'd sort of heard of Foursquare or Twitter or, Facebook.
This year, Scoble thought Hashable might be the company to make that break into the mainstream. And if this party is any indication, he could be right.
There was people calling me going, hey, I can't get in, can you get in? I'm like, man, I can't pull miracles, Hashable didn't exist a year ago, and today this is one of the biggest parties here, right?
The last time we caught up with Hashable was this past week, more than 2 months after South by Southwest.
South by Southwest was a great moment for us because we were able to rise above the noise, and it's a very noisy event. So I think that was a great moment for us, but you know, I honestly try not to have too many highs. Until you get all the deck chairs right, it's not time to celebrate.
So once again, they're sweating the details. They're trying to perfect everything from the words they use to describe it to the colors they put on the screen.
What's happened with the web is because it's so big and the stakes are so high, you've got to get every single little pixel. You got to get it right.
And that's what Emily Hickey was working on when we left her, trying to get it right. Instead of hiring a market research firm to figure out what users wanted, she hit the streets on a beautiful May afternoon to canvass the line at a local burger joint.
I guess it just depends on how, like, what the user interface was and how easily it
Now we're rethinking how do we broaden the message to get it out to a more mainstream crowd? What's our plan for scaling it to getting to millions of users?
Although Hickey wouldn't tell us how many users Hashable has now, she said they got a big boost at South by Southwest.
So now we're going to show you a totally different one.
But growth has slowed since then.
We just want to get your reaction to it.
Now the company is pushing towards another big blitz of new features and publicity in June.
I think I like this one.
I hope in a year that we're getting towards 1 million users and growing very, very quickly. And that we've found something that has very mainstream appeal, that's understandable and simple, that is explosive.
The first bullet point, send virtual business cards to anyone. What does that mean to you?
Wow, that's good.
Okay.
So for instance, if I meet you.
Whether Hashable and companies like it will be a good return on investment is, of course, an open question. But it's only a bubble if investors are paying more than companies can generate in profit. And with millions more smartphone users signing up, the new tech industry is betting this boom will not end in bust. Welcome back. New England seaports, dotted with fishing vessels, make for a charming picture postcard. But don't let the quaint images fool you. Commercial fishing is a huge business. Nationally, it's worth some $8 billion a year, and much of that is generated in the Northeast. It's also one of the most closely regulated businesses in the U.S. But for years, New England fishermen have alleged that government enforcement has gone way too far. Today, a retired federal judge agreed in a scathing report for the federal agency that regulates the fishing business. It was a vindication for some in the fishing community who say for too long their voices haven't been heard.
Today we got a beautiful day.
The fishing is pretty good these days off the New England coast.
That's a good one.
Where Tom Riley is bringing up sea scallops east of Chatham, Massachusetts. It's been a stormy ride for the fish off the East Coast. Long known as one of the richest fishing areas in the world, it was plentiful with cod, haddock, tuna, and swordfish, as well as scallops, lobsters, and clams up and down the coast.
I got right whales right in front of us. See them up there?
Even one of the world's rarest whales, the northern right whale, has come here for centuries to eat.
This time of year, they're down around here feeding on shrimp.
Riley remembers the abundant seas well. When he was a kid, it was easy to catch a boatload.
I had a small boat and traveled down to Chatham here and used to go cod fishing offshore, striped bass fishing, sell my catch, and that's pretty much how I started in the industry.
Things started to change in the 1970s when too many boats and too many fishermen went after the fish. The overfishing that followed threatened to kill off many species. The possibility of never seeing a codfish or the like again was not far-fetched. With the help of strict regulations and enforcement of new laws, the fish population started to revive. Today, almost all of the New England fish are back, many healthier than they have been in half a century. But what didn't change was the strict enforcement by the government agency in charge of the fisheries, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. That's right, the same federal agency that forecasts the weather is also in charge of enforcing the nation's fishing laws. And to police fishermen, NOAA has a small police force. It's this law enforcement arm that fishermen have complained about for the last decade. They say that a small number of NOAA's agents and prosecutors, located in this building in Gloucester, Massachusetts, were overzealous to the point of abusive. Fishermen from Maine to the Carolinas claim that no one was watching this small law enforcement group. No one controlled its overly aggressive tactics.
They had virtually no oversight, so they made the fines hundreds of times greater than what they should have been.
In Gloucester, Massachusetts, another fishing operation was clobbered by NOAA. Larry Shula runs the operation.
We're at the Gloucester Seafood Display Auction, which is my family's business.
Shula isn't a fisherman, but a fourth-generation owner of the warehouse where the fish that come off the boats are sold. NOAA came after him, what came to be known as the one fish case. One fish too many among tens of thousands of fish that came into his warehouse. The fine for one fish too many? $130,000. He fought back against NOAA.
And we decided at that point on the one fish case to take that stand and take that chance. We knew if we lost, we would be out of business and we would lose our livelihoods. Even more importantly, we feel when we lose that, because we're in this industry, we lose our lives because we know nothing else.
It took thousands of dollars paid to lawyers, but Shula won. The victory came at a price, he said. NOAA came after him even harder.
Just less than a year after I won the case against them, they came in here with 20 agents, bulletproof vests on, guns, step away from the computers, step away from the desks. They took all our paperwork. They took our day away, our dignity away. It was surreal.
This time, NOAA hit Shula with an even bigger fine for a minor paperwork violation.
The violation was for was close to $400,000, and basically they were going to take my licenses away forever, close my business down.
It's ridiculous what's happening.
The Gloucester fishing community rose up in loud protests over NOAA's actions against the seafood auction. They got the attention of politicians in Washington, and finally, after years of complaints, an independent inspector general was appointed to look into NOAA's alleged harsh tactics against the fishing community. The inspector general, or IG, investigated several cases, including the one against Shula's business.
What's going on over here?
Shula told the inspector general about what he says were constant harassing searches of his warehouse, searches by agents who entered unannounced, without court orders or search warrants. Nina Jarvis is the office manager.
They really just suck the life out of you, day in and day out, always coming in the building, not being very pleasant, don't come to the window to say hello, that they're even on the property.
One such raid took place at night, after the business was closed, the lights out. A fisheries agent, says Shula, first tried to get in the front door, but couldn't.
The agent was going to try to get in any way he could. So he ran around the restaurant area here, down the parking lot, and into this alleyway.
Then, Shula says, the agent headed to the door of a neighboring business, without a search warrant for that building either.
At that point, he went through that door, which is into somebody else's locker room.
Employees say these raids rattled them.
They came in with their full gear, with guns, attached to their hips, and their big, heavy coats, and, they're federal agents. What do you do?
Nina Jarvis discovered the warehouse security cameras had recorded the raid.
All the doors are shut at this point. There's a lock mechanism on them. This is the group here now that they've come in, and there's a few agents. You can see their shadows in the back here.
One of the complaints to the Inspector General was that agents acted as if they were on a criminal investigation, like a drug bust. But what they are looking for is fish that are too small, or a box of fish not properly weighed. None of these violations is criminal. They are all civil. So why the appearance of a criminal raid? That could be because, according to the Inspector General's report, 90% of NOAA's law enforcement staff is trained as criminal investigators, even though 98% of all fishing violations are civil violations.
And, they just walk in unannounced, because they say that they have the right to do so.
A current agent in the Northeast, familiar with the raid on the Gloucester warehouse, but who asked to remain anonymous for fear of losing his job, said this raid was ordered up by the senior members of NOAA's Gloucester office. And very rarely, the agent said, did these prosecutors bother with a search warrant.
You cannot come in here and take photographs. You do not have a warrant. You have no right to be in here to do this.
In this raid on another New England warehouse, agents of NMFS, that's the National Marine Fisheries Service, part of NOAA, walked in unannounced and started to snoop around and take pictures. When asked by the owner for a court document, they ignored him. They never did produce any search warrant.
This doesn't sound like this could happen in America. How can an agency do this? These people work for the United States government. They're supposed to be upholding the laws, and they're supposed to be protecting the people.
The biological data necessary to support...
Eric Schwab is the NOAA Assistant Administrator for Fisheries.
A big part of our job from an enforcement perspective is to ensure that the laws that are set in place not only to protect the fish and the rebuilding process, the biological goals, if you will, but also to make sure that the fishermen themselves are adhering to the laws that are set forth to ensure a level playing field for all fishermen.
We asked him about the practice of conducting raids like the one at the Gloucester Seafood Warehouse without search warrants.
I am not personally aware of any founded allegations that there have been violations of the rights of individuals or business owners associated with NOAA enforcement investigations or inspections.
The heavy penalties in cases like Shula's, say other fishermen, is one example of why they don't fight NOAA. Many told the Inspector General that they just settle the cases believing the cards are stacked against them. In his report, the Inspector General confirmed that fines against New England fishermen were excessive, some 5 times the national average. NOAA's Schwab says the agency has taken note.
This is another concern that was brought to our attention by the Office of the Inspector General's review. We have taken very specific steps, NOAA-wide, at the direction of the Secretary and the Administrator, to, first of all, put in place procedures to ensure consistency in the way that fines and penalties are applied from region to region around the country.
They have to understand that this industry is a bunch of family businesses running to survive. To do what? To bring food in, to feed Americans, or to feed the world, to sacrifice their lives at times, to bring food to America. And we're going through this, and the fishermen are attacked. They're not the enemy. The fishermen are not the enemy. We treat our enemies with more respect at war than we treat our fishermen or our industry.
This fisherman had to pay a penalty of more than $400,000. Wait till you hear what NOAA spent the money on. That's next when our investigation continues.
How are we doing today, folks?
Larry Yakubian made a major contribution to what NOAA calls the Asset Forfeiture Fund. That's the repository of all the fines paid by the fishermen. Some of those fines, like the one paid by Yakubian, are staggering. which is how the fund grew to nearly $100 million.
We're in Charlotte Harbor. It's quite a neat place. It's very shallow, be tarpon all over here, and the fishing is world class.
Larry Yakubian is now a tourboat captain in Florida, a long nightmare away from what he used to do and love, fish. In the more than 20 years he was a commercial fisherman, he had very few violations. But then, on one trip, he was fishing near an area closed to fishing. To this day, he maintains he was not over the line, but NOAA said he was. A NOAA prosecutor charged him with 3 violations, 2 for fishing in the closed area. The prosecutor used this PowerPoint presentation in court to show where Yakubian allegedly went. The 3rd charge was lying about his catch size. The penalty? NOAA barred him from ever fishing again, and he had to pay $430,000 into the Asset Forfeiture Fund. In order to pay the fines, Yakubian's wife had to sell the farm that had been in her family since the 1600s.
We lost the farm, and it was part of my wife's and my children's heritage, and it was all taken away. We all suffered. My kids suffered. I suffered. And I'm a tough SOB. And fortunately, I maintained control of my normally bad temper. And there were days that I said, this can't be happening in this country.
People are going to be writing in saying, who's that lady?
New Bedford Mayor Scott Lang is a former prosecutor. He says NOAA's law enforcement operation was one of the most corrupt he had ever seen.
The law enforcement agency that NOAA was operating was something that we haven't seen, quite frankly, in quite some time. I mean, I was appalled by the allegations originally, but when I found out that they were sustained, it was something that disturbed us greatly, and we realized that NOAA's operation was completely out of control.
One of the areas the mayor says that was out of control was the use of the Asset Forfeiture Fund. Until recently, the fishing community had no idea what NOAA spent the fine money on. Thanks to the Inspector General's report, now we do. Here's a sample of what the fishermen's fines paid for. The fund paid for bonuses to the prosecutors and executives inside NOAA law enforcement. Sometimes NOAA gave these bonuses even before the work was completed. One such bonus was awarded to the prosecutor in Yakubian's case. Dan Rather Reports has obtained this citation, a recommendation for a bonus of $2,000 for the prosecutor, Charles Julian. The citation reads, quote, "The judge was convinced of the efficacy of the government's case." Does that sound like the judge heard the case? He had not. The $2,000 award was made 6 months before Yakubian's trial started. The fund also paid for lots of trips for NOAA employees. These records, obtained by Dan Rather Reports, show that hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent from the fund to pay for extensive travel for NOAA employees, including international trips. One entry on this document is of particular interest to Yakubian. It shows that Prosecutor Julian, along with his co-counsel in the Yakubian case, went on an all-expense-paid trip to Malaysia in Southeast Asia, totally paid for out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund. And fueling further suspicions among the fishing community was this fact. The judge in Yakubian's case went with the prosecutors on that trip right after the case was settled. The prosecutors and judge attended the 4-day workshop together. We wanted to ask Julian about this, but he declined to be interviewed. All he did say to us is that he did nothing wrong. The Asset Forfeiture Fund was set up under the Magnuson-Stevens Act, the law that now governs the U.S. fisheries. As written, it does not seem to allow for such travel. The Act says the fund can pay for, quote, any expenses directly related to investigations and civil or criminal enforcement proceedings. Nothing about workshops. What else did the forfeiture fund pay for? The Inspector General's report discovered that NOAA's Office of Law Enforcement used the fund to purchase 200 vehicles for a staff that numbered only 172. The fund, built by Fishermen's Fines, also paid $300,000 for a luxurious boat with a beautifully appointed cabin for NOAA. The Inspector General suggested that NOAA audit the multi-million-dollar fund, which has never been done. Schwab says one just recently began.
That audit is underway. Those results are expected. I can't give you the exact date off the top of my head.
Earlier, for his report, the Inspector General hired the accounting company KPMG to review the assets in the fund. Those accountants were able to determine the fund had collected some $90 million, but the auditors couldn't find where half of it was spent. We asked if NOAA knows where those missing millions of dollars went.
So the absolute amount of money that existed at the fund at any one time still remains very much the subject of and in need of further audit.
We asked about the use of the Asset Forfeiture Fund to purchase 200 vehicles for the 172-member staff of NOAA's Law Enforcement Office.
We developed a draft policy. We've been operating under that draft policy. That policy, for example, precludes the expenditure of proceeds for the purchase of vehicles and vessels at this point, not because we viewed that to be illegal, but because we want to remove even the potential for appearance of conflict of interest between our enforcement activities and the way that we would that we would fund them.
What about the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on travel out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund? The head of fisheries told us the fund will continue to pay for international travel.
That dealing with illegal fishing activity that occurs in other countries is very important, not only to supporting our conservation agenda here in this country, but ensuring a level playing field for U.S. fishermen. So there is a legitimate purpose for investigations that take place overseas, as well as travel overseas to help other countries in capacity building through technical assistance and, frankly, in just comparing notes.
Yakubian says the whole thing reeks.
It's disgusting to think that this happened in my country that I love.
He believes that when the audit of the Asset Forfeiture Fund is completed, more abuses by NOAA will come to light.
That was their little cookie jar, and they used it as they saw fit.
No NOAA employee has been charged with any criminal act for any fraud or misuse of the fund, and no one at NOAA has been fired for any abuse. That includes Dale Jones, the Director of Law Enforcement for NOAA. During the Inspector General's investigation of his department, Jones shredded bags full of files numbering in the hundreds. By the time he finished, Jones had destroyed 3/4 of the documents in his office, according to the Inspector General. In a confidential memo to the head of NOAA that we obtained, the Inspector General wrote that he found, quote, the shredding was non-compliant with a Federal Records Management regulation.
There was never any suggestion from the Inspector General, nor in any kind of a follow-up review, that suggested criminal charges would be in order.
But the Inspector General's investigation contains just such a suggestion. That review adds, quote, there may have been a violation of obstruction of a federal audit. We ask about that.
Right, and again, maybe is an important word. Obviously, the Inspector General has very specific authorities and could have taken that further had the Inspector General's office seen fit to do so.
They breached every trust you can imagine, and there should be accountability to it.
New Bedford Mayor Lang wants an independent criminal probe.
The U.S. Attorney's Office should conduct an investigation as to whether or not any laws were broken, and if so, then the people should be prosecuted. They haven't made the wholesale changes they need to. Instead of firing people, instead of asking for criminal charges against individuals, instead of making them come up with restitution for some of the things that they did. NOAA has, in essence, reshuffled the deck, transferred people out, and it's business as usual.
Today, senior NOAA officials traveled to Gloucester, Massachusetts to meet with members of the fishing community. They brought along a new report that validated much of what you've heard tonight. But the feds also came with a personal message. They apologized for past abuses and promised financial reimbursements. We were told that among those who will be compensated are Larry Shula from the fish auction and Larry Yakubian, who now is the tour boat guide in Florida. Our investigation is now complete, at least for the moment. We'll continue to monitor the situation. And that's our program for tonight. For HDNet, from New York, Dan Rather reporting. Good night. If you would like to add your name to an email list for information on upcoming programs, or if you would just like to send a question or comment, please email us at viewer@hd.net. Good evening. We begin tonight with a high-tech milestone. For the first time ever, there were more smartphones shipped from manufacturers in the fourth quarter of last year than personal computers. Now, just think about that. The gadget that began as a high-priced novelty is quickly replacing the desktop as our most needed and beloved piece of technology. Smartphones have created a new and growing class of constantly connected consumers. And in just a few years, it's projected that there will be more than 1 billion of them. People are calling this mobile revolution the next wave of the internet. And getting the attention of all those eyeballs has become big business. The way companies reach these mobile users is through apps, software applications that turn your phone into anything from an arcade game to an old brick building in Midtown Manhattan. Welcome to the home of Hashable, an internet startup with just 17 employees. If you haven't heard of it, you're not alone. And that's what 41-year-old founder and CEO Mike Yavenditti, along with his team, are working so hard to change.
When I hire someone, I tell them to be prepared for a 5-year slog.
Yavenditti knows what he's talking about because he's done this before. He was an executive at several early dot-coms, and he helped build an online ad business that sold to AOL for $340 million. A question, you've already made it. Why not just sail off the coast of the Riviera, drink champagne, and savor what you've done?
Yeah, I did better than I ever expected to, that's for sure. But, I love doing it. Things are too exciting right now to go sit. I'm not the type to sit on the beach anyway, so.
And Yavenditti thinks that Hashable could be his biggest success. One of the things he's trying to do.
The following is an HDNet original presentation.
Tonight, inside the new internet revolution. Billions at stake, but how to make money? There's no app for that. Well, give me a couple of specific examples of how you generated revenue.
We don't do it yet, but we have a desire to do it.
You do not have a warrant. You have no right to be in here to do this.
Also, a special investigation. A powerful government bureaucracy takes on commercial fishermen. Hook, line, and sinker.
They came in here with 20 agents, bulletproof vests on, guns, step away from the computers, step away from the desks. They took our dignity away. It was surreal.
We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Reports. Is replace the business card. So you don't give me a business card?
No, I don't hand it to you. That's old-fashioned. I want to do it the new way. So I type in your Twitter handle, which is Dan Rather Report, right?
Right.
It's adding you to my address book and denoting the fact that we are in the hashable office. So it date stamps, time stamps, and geography stamps our virtual handshake. So I've just done it.
Mm-hmm.
I've sent you my business card. I even created this nice map that shows us geographically where we are. And I've told my friends that are on the system that I've friended that Dan Rather and I just met. And maybe someone will find that interesting.
And that leads to the other big feature of Hashable's app. You can record all your business and social interactions. And if you wish, broadcast them to the world. With people increasingly sharing their lives online, Yavendetti thinks it's a service with a lot of appeal. To a map of nearby banks. Some cost money, but many companies give them away for free, just for the chance to tap into this huge new audience. There are more than 350,000 apps available just for the iPhone. With so many programs, it's tough to get noticed. If you do, there's money to be had from big spending venture capitalists. Take a new free app called Color, a social networking program for sharing photographs. Investors say it's a winner, and they pumped $41 million into the startup. It's big money. Some say too much. The stakes are high. Investors and entrepreneurs are rushing in, afraid of being left behind. But some skeptics say it's a bubble waiting to burst. Trying to navigate these choppy waters is a harrowing ride. And tonight we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how one company is hoping to make it big in this new tech landscape. Our story begins on the 16th floor of